Hey Powell Church, I'm Peter Kim here with this week's announcements. So first up, we want to welcome all of you who have joined us online today. And if it's your first time or even the first few times with us, we would love to hear from you. Just go to powellchurch.com and scroll to the bottom of the page and click on our Connect button. It's a great way to let us know you are here and tell us a little about you. And if you would like to support the ministries of Powell Church through financial gifts, you may do so by visiting powellchurch.com, downloading the Church Center app, or mailing a check. Also, we are calling on anyone who may be interested in being a part of the media team. Volunteer positions will include camera operator, lighting, sound mixing, and much more. Live streaming will be new to Powell Church, and we'll need some help to make it all go. If you're interested, please email media@powellchurch.com. We're also looking for those who would be willing to help keep the church clean and sanitized as we begin the process of returning to our building. We would just need an hour or two of your time during the weekdays. If interested, please email Rob Mason at rob@powellchurch.com. And don't forget, VBS registration is live as we speak. You can register and find out more info right from the homepage of powellchurch.com or by downloading the Church Center app. And finally, 6 years ago this month, Powell Church launched Recovery at Powell. We had no idea the incredible journey that we would get to experience. We have provided a meal, worship, and open share groups from the beginning. As with everything, the pandemic has shifted how we gather, yet has not changed the desperate need for hope in the midst of reality. Powell Church, thank you for your continued support of Recovery at Powell through your prayers and your gifts. We look forward to continuing to take life one day at a time and being witness to what God is doing in our midst. Now let us join our worship team as we sing praises and worship our God.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You've been so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You've been so kind to me. Deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Your foe, still your love fought for me. You've been so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You've been so kind to me. Oh, No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99, and I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, and I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. Riches I heed not, nor men's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance, now and always. Thou and thou only, first in my heart. High King of heaven, my treasure thou art. High King of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, a bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all.
One time, my boys and I were out hiking in the woods, and it was a trail that I was not familiar with. Well, it was also a trail that wasn't very well marked. And I accidentally, without them knowing, I accidentally got us off the trail because I lost sight of the trail markers. It's easy for us as we walk through life, as we seek to follow Jesus, it's easy for us to lose sight, that we can drift off the path. Sometimes we can get ourselves seriously lost. I love what the prophet Isaiah says in the 30th chapter, the 21st verse. Isaiah writes these words, "Your own ears will hear him. Right behind you, a voice will say, 'This is the way you should go.'" I wish that day when I was hiking that I had had that voice behind me. We managed to find our way back to the trail. But there are times in life where I wish I could hear that voice more clearly, that this is the way you should go. Times are confusing right now. There are a lot of voices out there in culture saying one thing or another, whether it's in politics or race relations. There are people out there shouting really loud messages. And what we need to seek is the voice of God, our merciful, loving, caring God. We need to seek after the things of God. And so I want to invite you into a time of prayer in which you seek after God's voice, that you listen for God's voice. Which way is God telling you to go? So I invite you now into a time of silent prayer. Usually, either me or Janie or someone leads you in prayer, but I want to invite you to spend this time with God in prayer. So let's turn our hearts and our minds to God as we go to Him in prayer, as we seek God's voice and the directions that we need to go. Let us pray to the Lord. Our culture tells us today that first impressions are everything. Whether it's an interview for a job, or maybe you are applying for a school or trying to get a scholarship, or whether it's meeting somebody for the very first time, maybe you're being introduced to some people that you're going to be working with, or maybe family members, or maybe it's a first date that you're going on, we're told how important first impressions are. Some experts say that we size up new people in the first 30 seconds to 2 minutes upon meeting them, that we begin to formulate our assumptions about that person in that very first few minutes. Leaders in the field of hospitality say people will make up their minds whether they're going to return to a business or return to a restaurant or even return to a church. They make up their mind, a lot of people do, in the first 7 minutes of actually driving on to the property of that place. Again, our culture emphasizes that first impressions are really important. There are commercials in our culture too that have added fuel to this notion. I remember Canon cameras used the phrase, "image is everything." Dry Idea deodorant, they had a slogan that said, "Never let them see you sweat," because apparently sweating is like a bad thing or something. And still other clothing industries have used the phrase, "always dress to impress." First impressions are a big deal. I remember being a middle schooler. I remember being a high schooler. And I remember that I was aware of these kinds of things as well. I was aware of what I was wearing. I knew how many pimples were on my face on any given day. I was aware of who I hung out with, how I interacted with them. I tried to be funny. I tried to impress people with things that I said, tried to please people. That was a part of who I was as a middle schooler. And why? Well, I was always seeking some level of approval. And in order to do that, I had to constantly try to impress people. I even still do it at times today as an adult. As a pastor, there's this part of me that wants to impress. And I have to ask myself, where is this coming from? Why do I have this need to impress people? Well, when you cut right through everything, it comes down to this. It comes from a place of insecurity. Our insecurity about ourselves leads us to long for approval, to long for applause, and to long for acceptance by others. We try to impress. As we grow older, that can come in the form of driving the right car, or living in the right house or the right neighborhood, or being a part of the right social group, or landing that job, or getting into that club, or getting that particular promotion. It could be regarding our body, not only what we wear, but the shape of our body and the shape that we get ourselves in, and what we weigh and how our hair is done. There are so many things that play into our ways of thinking of how we can impress people for the purpose of getting approval and being accepted and even getting applause. Unfortunately, though, when we seek after these things to impress people, oftentimes that approval and that applause is short-lived. And the next thing we find ourselves doing is seeking after it again. We actually, believe it or not, we even do this in our church communities. I can remember doing this, wondering if I was going to be good enough at a particular church or at a particular gathering of Christians. Like, was I a good enough person? Would they accept me? Or would I have enough knowledge of the Bible? Or had I memorized just the right amount of Bible verses to impress people? Or could I pray eloquently? Would people think, oh, wow, he can pray so well? Or maybe it was, the fact that I had some fears and I had some doubts, but I was afraid to express those because I was afraid of what people would think about me. They'd think, wow, he's not that great of a Christian. This even happens in Christian community as well, that we try to impress so that we can be accepted, so that we can be approved, that we can somehow receive some level of applause. Regardless of where or how you try to manage your image, whether that's at work or at school or among friends or maybe even at church, the results will always be the same. Once we get caught up in trying to constantly impress in order to seek approval, we will then find ourselves eventually exhausted, frustrated, and insecure, which is where all of this began in the first place, is just not being secure. And then it becomes a vicious cycle. And you try to impress, to get acceptance, to get applause, to get approval, and then you find yourself exhausted, and then you find yourself worn down, frustrated, and then all of a sudden you realize that you're insecure. And so you get caught in that cycle. And let me tell you that very cycle right there is exactly opposite of what God desires for us. Because God desires freedom for us. And as long as we are under this pressure to impress people, as long as we keep focusing in on our image in order to make sure that people will like us and all of that, then we are going to find ourselves exhausted and frustrated over and over and over, and that we will never, ever find a place of contentment. We'll always be trying to focus in on how do we impress others. And I tell you, my friends, it's not a game that you can win. The people in the church in Galatia, they had a similar issue as well. Here in the month of July, we began a new series last week called Real Freedom. And the people in Galatia actually found themselves in a similar vicious cycle of seeking approval and acceptance. Now, last week I briefly shared with you what was going on here in the church in Galatia. Paul is writing a letter to them because they are getting mixed messages. They are receiving conflicting notions about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Paul told them that they could follow Jesus without following all the Jewish laws. You see, Galatia was a region that was primarily Gentile. They were not Jews by nature. And so Paul had gone there to preach the gospel, to tell them about Jesus, and to let them know that all they had to do was follow Jesus. But some other Jewish Christians came in later, after Paul's visit, after Paul had helped establish their church. They came in and they told them that they had to follow the Jewish laws, that the men had to become circumcised, that they had to become Jewish first before they could follow Jesus. And Paul was frustrated because the gospel of Jesus, which Paul proclaims, is a message of freedom. The gospel is a life of freedom. And that message was getting muddied up by others who were coming in and saying that they had to become Jewish first, that they had to follow all of these rules and all of these laws and all of these regulations before they could follow Jesus. So Paul writes them a letter. And usually when Paul writes a letter, he opens with these very loving and warm greetings. Well, when Paul writes to the Galatians, he kind of skips through some of these typical niceties that he usually puts in his letters. And he starts off this way. So I'm going to read to you from the letter of Galatians, the very first chapter, beginning with verse 6 and 7. Paul writes these words: I am shocked that you are turning away so soon from God, who called you to himself through the loving mercy of Christ. You are following a different way that pretends to be the good news, but it is not the good news at all. You are being fooled by those who deliberately twist the truth concerning Christ. Yeah, not a real warm greeting to the people of Galatia. Paul gets right to the issue with them. He said a different gospel that these other people had come back later and told them that they had to follow all the laws. He says a different gospel is not the gospel at all. It is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. The good news is Jesus and Jesus alone. It's not Jesus plus following all the laws. It is Jesus plus nothing. That's the good news. And then Paul has to then move into dealing with some issues that the people in the Galatian church were struggling with, especially as it related to this whole concept of seeking approval and acceptance. And so he continues in that first chapter, verse 10, he writes, obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. Again, Paul gets straight to the point. Paul knows that his message wasn't going to please everyone. He knew that he would make some people upset, but he wasn't bothered by that because he knew that you cannot please everyone. Plus, he didn't want his own need for approval to overshadow what really mattered. And for Paul, what really mattered is the good news of Jesus Christ. There is a difference between caring about something and being controlled by it. Paul cared about the people, about the Christians at the church in Galatia. He had been in ministry with them. He had established their church. He had helped them to begin to form Christian community. He'd helped them along on their way towards discipleship and following after Jesus. He had invested a lot of time and a lot of love into the people there at the Galatian church. But he was not controlled by a need for their approval. And therein lies the distinction. A person who is really free, and that's what Paul was trying to teach them. A person who is really free lives for God and lives for God's approval and not the approval of others. These other people had come in to say, you have to follow the law. And so the Galatians were like, well, I guess we have to follow the law. We've got to get the approval of these persons before we can follow Jesus. And Paul is saying, no, that is not the gospel, and you do not need to seek the approval of others. All you need is the approval of God. And Jesus is that. Now, that doesn't mean that you get to be nasty and mean-spirited towards other people. We live in a culture that is filled with that. Jesus teaches us that we can't say that we love God if we don't show that we love other people. Loving others is a way in which we love God. But impressing others for the sake of gaining approval and acceptance, that's not necessary. You don't have to gain acceptance and gain applause from somebody in order to love them and to be kind to them. We do not need to gain the approval and the acceptance and the applause of others in order to love them. Now, I know that this can all get a little messy, and it can also sound a little easier than it is to actually do. I mean, we think about Paul, and in our minds, Paul was like this mega Christian who had it all together. He was like the professional Christian. Of course, we've learned that Paul didn't think of himself that way whatsoever. But we think of Paul that way. And so we think, of course, Paul, he gets it. He can rise above all of this. But what about us? Living like God's approval matters more than the approval of others doesn't sound that simple to us. So, let me give you 3 things that might help you. Try to discern if you are living for the approval of others. So, first thing, if you're willing to do certain things when certain people are around that you would never do alone, then you might be seeking after the approval of others. Or if what other people say or think about you, and this could be friends or a boss or people that you work with or people you go to school with or maybe even people in your small group, if what other people say and think about you changes how you feel about yourself, then you might be subject to seeking the approval of others. And a third thing, if you feel like you're living a split-screened life, that the way you act and live at work or at school or out in public is different from the way that you live and act at home. If the way that you act at church on Sunday morning is different from the way that you act on Friday evening, then you might be susceptible to the approval of others. Does any of this resonate with you? Has any of this ever resonated with you? If so, then this message for you today is vital. God didn't make you to be controlled by anything or anyone. God wants you to be free. And that is even including being free of the approval of others. Now, for others, you may be thinking, well, this is not hard for me whatsoever. I am like Paul. I can just speak the truth and I'm not worried about what other people may think. The thing about that is then we have to be cautious of not being harsh. We got to guard against from being harsh, because what we are called to do is, yes, we are called to love God with everything that we have, but we are also called to be kind and merciful, and we're called to care for, and we're called to love others. So while Paul was telling the truth, he wasn't mean-spirited in the way that he did it. He sought to speak the truth in love. You know, going after the approval of God doesn't mean losing the respect of others. In fact, we are going to show our faith in God by the way that we love and treat others. But you don't have to be controlled by others' opinions of you. Imagine what it would feel like tomorrow if you could wake up without the pressure of being approved by anyone. Imagine living with the realization that you are already approved by God, which is the one that matters. And then when it comes to others, your only requirement is to love them well. Imagine waking up with that tomorrow. Can you sense the freedom? That's the real freedom that God wants for us. And that is the freedom that Paul was trying to tell the Galatians. You don't have to impress all these other people who are telling you that you have to follow all the Jewish rules and laws and requirements. All you need to do is follow Jesus. Jesus is what is most important. So follow Jesus. You have been accepted and loved by the King of Kings, by the Lord of Lords. That, my friends, is good news. And now all I need to do is look to Jesus, to hear his teachings, to see how he lived his life, and then to allow my life to be conformed to his. That's freedom. I'm free from having to impress anybody. And I am simply free to live for Jesus. I don't have to get the approval of all these people because I have been approved and loved by God through Jesus Christ. So that is my hope and my prayer for you today. May God bless this message that I have to listen to and that I have to work through on a daily basis, but this message that God has given to us through Paul and through his letter to the Galatians, because God desires us to be free, to have abundant life. Thanks be to God. Amen. Well, friends, you see the picture on the screen. It is the picture of Craig and Regina Guston. Craig and Regina began coming to Powell Church right before we ended up having to close our building for worship services. And I have been in conversation with them through email during these recent weeks, and I've had some phone calls with them as well. And they seek to join our congregation at Powell Church. And so they have answered the questions of glorifying God and upholding the church by their prayers, their presence, their gifts, their service, and their witness. They have been doing this over the last few months. And so now we get to welcome them into the life and the fellowship of our body of believers here at Powell Church. So thanks be to God for Craig and Regina for uniting with us through membership here at Powell Church. And if you ever have any questions about membership or baptism, or you want to talk to me, please be sure to get in contact with us. You can email me at bhyde@powellchurch.com, and I would love to have these conversations with you. Well, again, thank you for being with us for online worship today. And again, if you didn't get a chance, if this is the first, second, third time you're with us, we'd love for you to connect with us. Go to powellchurch.com, scroll down to the bottom of that page, and you can click on our digital connect card there. You can also sign up for our e-newsletter. We're going to be sharing information about when and how we will be reopening our building. We've currently reopened for our small groups, and we are looking towards worship, but we will keep you posted. So if you are not receiving any emails from us, go to the newsletter link there and sign up to be a part of our e-newsletter. Also, you can continue to support the work and ministry of the church. At the top of the webpage, there's a Give tab there. If you would like to give financially to the church, please click on that. It's easy also to sign up for reoccurring gifts through that financial giving link. You can also download the Church Center app, and at the bottom of the app is a give link or a tab there where you can give as well. I encourage you to give to the work and the ministry of the church through those methods. Or if you prefer, you can mail a check in to the address that you see on your screen. Thank you. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for the ways that you're reaching out to people. Thank you for staying in ministry and following God's lead in this new situation that we find ourselves in. We're all in this together. So thank you for continuing to be faithful to God through the work of God's church. Well, we love you and we miss you. We are praying for you, and we hope that we can gather again soon. We'll see. But we can still go and be the church. We are still God's people. The Holy Spirit still dwells within us. So I encourage you to go forth, live as free people in Jesus. Go and be the church wherever you're at. Be kind, be loving, lift other people up. Let people know that the God of light and love reflects in and through you, and maybe, just maybe, people will get a glimpse of that and will want to know more. So go and be the church wherever you're at. For those of you who want to stay on right after this, I will be having time that I call Coffee with the Pastor. So jump on our church's Facebook page and join me there. And otherwise, we will be having a conversation about today's message on Wednesday night on my personal Facebook page. So if you're not friends with me and you would want to be a part of that, go on ahead and friend request me. My name again is Bradley Hyde. And I'll accept your friend request. And at 6:30 on Wednesday, we'll have some more conversations about today's message. And then finally, we will gather here on Facebook for Thursday evening worship at 6:30 for our recovery. So encourage you to hang with me for just a few minutes. Come join me on Wednesday night and join us as a church as we worship God on Thursday evenings at 6:30 as well. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Take care, God bless, and have a great week.